people say that you are? Really, I mean, who do people say you are? Welcome back. This is the 17th Sunday of Pentecost. And what other people say and what we think about ourselves sometimes dovetail, sometimes diverge. Who's right, who's wrong? We might imagine that church is supposed to be about Jesus or even God. Honestly, I don't think so. I think that what we're doing here in this place and what maybe is happening in yours is instead a reminder or a refresher about us. Jesus and God are more than capable of fending for themselves. And according to Christian spiritual wisdom, there is nothing that you and I can say or do that will bring us closer to Jesus or God. We're blessed or limited by what God and or Jesus wish to reveal about themselves to us. The fact is, what we know about Jesus and God in any real sense might just fill a thimble. What we get to know about the big mysteries of life and God and supernatural stuff is really very small. If we're lucky, we get to encounter God once in a while in the beauty of holiness and the holiness of beauty and the terror of dying and death, in the joy of loving and crying and the awe of living life out beyond our capacities. But what we get to know, really know, about spiritual things like Jesus and God, is enormously infinitesimal. We think we know a lot because the Bible is full of words. Thousands of words. And that's just the beginning, because we've filled thousands and thousands of volumes since the Bible was put together with millions and millions of words about God and Jesus. But today's gospel is just another reminder or an indication, actually, of how little we really know about Jesus. At the very moment we imagine the text of the Bible is telling us a lot. You see, in Mark's story about Peter, as Peter blurts out, "You're the Messiah." Well, we naturally think, okay, Peter has it down, let's move on. The way this story has most often been preached is to proclaim it as an illustration or verification that Peter was the first to recognize that Jesus was God's right-hand man. And there is a terrible irony to that claim. Because you remember the word Messiah, which we translate Christ, was a nebulous term when Jesus was alive. We imagine sitting here in our 21st century crow's nest and looking back across the centuries that Jesus' contemporaries meant the same thing by Messiah that we mean today. Not so. Remember, there's 2,000 years of proclamations and creeds and doctrines built like a wall between them and us. Messiah back then could refer to an ordinary person called to a specific task by God, like we refer to clergy as being called. Messiah could also refer to the king or a prophet of Israel. Messiah could even refer to a king or a prophet of another nation, another religion that Israel imagined was being used by God to move history toward God's ultimate goal. You know how Christian nationalists in the United States now talk about this nation as a servant of God's plan, and particular politicians as God's vehicles. You know, that kind of thing. Messiah could also refer to one of dozens of mythical and supernatural figures that peasants in Jesus' day hoped would appear on the threshold of history and destroy the Roman Empire. In short, the term Messiah was so indistinct and meant so many things to so many people that we have no idea really what it meant to a fisherman in first century Galilee named Peter. We have no idea what Peter meant when Mark remembers that he proclaimed Jesus as Messiah, because it could have meant so many things. Now that doesn't need to be bad news for us. In fact, it's good news. It means that you and we can hold very different ideas about who or what we imagine Jesus was, and yet we can still be bonded in the very same spiritual community with one another. We do not have to agree with one another. We do not even have to have clarity for ourselves about who Jesus was or is. Instead, no matter what we believe about Jesus or God or church, we would be better off if we always began from a place of humility. Humility in this case is to acknowledge how little we know, how dependent we are upon God's wisdom for our insights. In fact, to begin from the acknowledgement that we don't really know is the most important starting place of faith and spirituality. Mystery, unknowing, is what keeps us curious. It's what keeps us humble. It's what keeps us awed and amazed and open. So we are not here in a place like this to say who God is or act as if we know who Jesus was or is. Rather, we come here to listen. Listen for who we are. And because we are in the liturgical season of creation, as we call it, and because I'm immersed right now in Richard Powers' The Overstory, we need to also ask the creation who we are and what it has to say about us. If you read any of my columns in the Finger Lakes Times or when I posted them on my professional website, then you know that I listen to the elements and the life forms of the non-human world as if they're speaking to me and you. I do not always hear them, and without doubt, I often project myself upon them. Even so, trees, for example, do communicate. We know this. We know this to be a fact, finally, in ways that we humans measure facts. The water, the rain, what we call weeds, fungi, all of them communicate, and sometimes even to us. Now, of course, peoples who lived closer to the earth than we do knew this long ago. They didn't have to learn how to measure it in a laboratory to know it. They listened. I'm no more sophisticated at listening to creation than I am at listening to God. I'm a generalist and not especially proficient at any one thing, so I can't really tell you or teach you or convince you how to listen to creation or God. Not with some guaranteed surefire technique with which you will definitely hear who they think you are. All I can tell you is if you try, and if you practice, and you're open, you will hear. What we will hear, at least in my experience, is wisdom breathing through the creation and nudging us to be different. Yes, the ego consumes fish, wisdom will say, but she's not a consumer. You're a consumer. It's how you have defined yourselves as a species. Maybe you could try another way instead, wisdom might urge. Notice, she might say, how those poplars have grown in such proximity to one another. It's one tree, interconnected underground. You see many, but it is one. You think there are many people, but you are one, acting like many, and so your rootedness is diseased. Stuff like that we might hear. Of course, such feedback about who I am or who we are comes as whispers in the wind and without words. But, like a prayer from God to me or to you, the whispers do come. So let's stop yammering so much about who God is, who Jesus was or is. Instead, listen. Listen for God to whisper. Listen for wisdom to breathe through the creation. Listen to the life in our bodies and how it is connected to these others. Listen, not just to other human voices, but to the quieter voices that whisper wisdom to us. Peace be with you, and may you hear some wisdom.